Hey everyone, a massive welcome back to the channel. This week takes us around the county of Nottinghamshire and to visit Newark Castle. Standing proudly on the banks of the River Trent, the castle has weathered many historic storms since it was built nearly 900 years ago, and is the site where notoriously famed bad King John took his last breath. So why not join us as we discover and wonder the scarred remains of Newark Castle. Although partially destroyed during the English Civil War, the remains still boast the largest gateway of any castle in England, and enough of the impressive structure still stands for us to fully appreciate its worthy nickname of the Guardian of the Trent. Newark was built originally around the year of 1070 as a Norman Motte and Bailey earthwork fortress to replace an earlier Saxon fortified manor that had existed on the site in Nottinghamshire since the 10th century. The castle developed around 1133 to 1135 when Henry I granted Bishop Alexander of Lincoln, who was the lord of the manor of Newark, permission to build a castle. This developed into a stone construction towards the end of the 12th century. So far in this story, England has only had one King John, and his reputation stands that he was a bad one. However, many times some historians suggest that this defamed monarch had been misrepresented, misunderstood, or was at least no worse than any other medieval king, especially of that time. Yet others believe that John was as bad as they got. In fact, by most accounts, King John appears to have been untrustworthy, shockingly cruel, and a predator of the lowest sort. The authenticity of the real King John has of course been camouflaged for most of us by seemingly endless stage and screen representations as a kind of pantomime villain, often pitted against a heroic Robin Hood, who ironically is a mere legend. The castle is most famous as the location in which King John died of dysentery on the 19th of October in 1216, although legend says it that he was poisoned. John had been on campaign immediately before his death. His kingdom was being torn apart by war, with two enemy armies opposing him on English soil. The first of these was the army of the French Prince Louis, the later King Louis VIII of France, in alliance with the rebel English barons who had invited the French invasion, and from the north a Scottish army led by its king, Alexander II. They were marching south to pay respect to Louis. John was taken ill at King's Lynn and had lost a great deal of his baggage, including his crown jewels, in the tidal channels and mudflats of the Wash on his way back to Newark. John truly did demonstrate his utter incompetence by losing the crown and all of his clothes, and topping this off by dying by a surfeit of peaches. The suggestion that John's death, caused by sin of gluttony, was great propaganda that added to his unsavoury reputation, but other sources suggested that he was poisoned, emphasising his reputation for being hated. He just couldn't win. Modern historians believe he actually died of dysentery, and tradition is that he expired in the Great Gatehouse, to which there is no public access to the upper room where this is supposed to have happened, and in its ruinous state, the places where one of England's most revelled kings gasped his last exhausted breath, looks as bleak as forlorn as a death chamber can be. To end all of it off, the story goes that John's attendants deserted him at the last minute, and his servants looted the room. But he was granted enough respect for his body to be taken to Worcester Cathedral and given a decent burial. His legend lives on through these castle walls. Newark was held for the king during the Civil War because it controlled one of the main north and south routes, so the castle was considered to be of immense strategic importance, and Parliament besieged it on 3 different occasions. King John had entrusted Newark Castle to one of his mercenaries, Robert de Goey. Following on John's death, the new King Henry III ordered Robert to give up the castle to the Bishop of Lincoln. Robert ignored this instruction, as well as several no-nonsense royal reminders, and in 1218 a strong force was dispatched to take the fortress by force. After a weeks-long siege, de Goey was persuaded to leave in return for £100 of silver. Sometime after this siege, probably around the end of the 13th century, Newark Castle's river curtain wall was rebuilt and several other improvements were made. For a while in the 14th century, the castle was in the hands of Donald, the Earl of Mar, who was a nephew of Robert the Bruce, and he carried out further improvements before the castle was handed back to the Bishop of Lincoln. Considerable alterations took place again in the late 15th century under the Bishop Thomas Rotherham, before the castle reverted to the Crown at the Reformation in 1547. Following on a period of neglect, much needed repairs were made by Sir William Cecil, including the insertion of rather grand windows on the river curtain wall. By this time, Newark Castle had been transformed from a castle to a rather nice fortified Tudor residence, suitable for both James I and his son Charles I to stay in, and which they did. The second big event in the story of the castle was the English Civil War, which broke out on the 22nd of August in 1642, when King Charles I raised the royal standard at nearby Nottingham. Given its strategic position, Newark-on-Trent has often been called the key to the north, and held out for the Royalist cause. The town was besieged 3 times, in February 1643, February 1644, and, in the wake of the decisive parliamentary victory at Naseby on the 14th of June, for a 3rd time from the end of November 1644, when it was surrounded by 2 armies, one Scots, one English. It eventually surrendered only on the direct instruction of Charles I, who, seeking to drive a wedge between rival factions in the 2 armies that faced him, surrendered to the Scots commander, Lord Leven, at Southwell. One of the demands of Charles's captors was the immediate capitulation of Newark, which happened on the 8th of May 1646. The role of Newark during this bitter war is another story. Luckily, there is an excellent Civil War museum in the town, the National Civil War Centre, which is worth a visit. The castle was then dismantled sufficiently to prevent it being used again by parliamentary forces following the surrender. Allegedly, the blackening of the stonework around the gatehouse was caused by the gunpowder that the troops used. The walls of the castle still bear the marks from the parliamentary cannon fire too. The main features of the castle are the gatehouse, the castle dungeons, the curtain wall and the southwest tower. There are regular guided tours of the dungeons and the towers, but at other times these areas are actually locked, which is such a shame considering. But if you manage to get on one of the tours, you'll be able to delve down into the various dungeons here. From the riverside, the castle looks very impressive, looming above the water like a barrier, but it's only when you approach from the town that you realise how one-sided the structure is. For on the town side there are almost no remaining walls, though the towers and the gatehouse are still impressive, and not forgetting the windows and architecture. It's a very beautiful structure and incredible, even one-sided, how much still manages to show off the once grandeur that Newark Castle once had. The town of Newark is just a stone's throw from the castle and the beautiful gardens. We walked along the river and had a look at the various canal boats passing through, and then on to the pub at the end of the walkway. But just a 3 to 5 minute walk will take you from the castle right onto the high street, where you'll find plenty to keep you fed and happy. We really enjoyed our visit here and would love to come back down to see just inside those dungeons. But we would definitely want to encourage anybody interested and in the area of Nottinghamshire to give this castle a chance. So if you've enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit that like button, consider subscribing to the channel, or joining and supporting us over on our YouTube memberships or on our Patreon. We want to say a big thank you to those who support us. It's super encouraging and we appreciate you all. So we'll see you on the next one. Till next time.